I'm Sarah Mitchell, 28, and I thought I knew my family until 4:30 that morning when desperate knocking shattered my sleep. 3 shivering children stood on my doorstep in thin pajamas, tears streaming down their faces. "Aunt Sarah, please help us," whispered Emma, my brother's oldest. Behind her, 6-year-old twins Jake and Lucy clutched each other, blue lips trembling in the freezing February air. What I discovered that night about my brother Marcus and his wife Jessica would destroy everything I believed about family loyalty and expose a betrayal so deep, it would tear our family apart forever. But before we dive into this family nightmare, I need to know, where are you watching from tonight? If this story hits close to home, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will show you just how far some people will go to protect their own secrets, even if it means sacrificing innocent children. The children were hypothermic. I rushed them inside, wrapping them in blankets while cranking up the heat. Emma, barely 10 years old, tried to be brave, but her voice shook as she explained what happened. Mommy and Daddy had a big fight. Daddy threw things, and Mommy was crying. Then they both got in the car and left. They said they'd be back, but that was yesterday morning. Yesterday morning. My blood turned to ice. These children had been alone for over 24 hours in a house with no heat, no food, and no adults. I checked the twins for frostbite while Emma continued talking, her words tumbling out between chattering teeth. We knocked on neighbors' doors, but nobody answered. Mrs. Peterson's lights were on, but she looked through the window and turned them off. We walked here because Daddy always said if something bad happened, we should come to Aunt Sarah. I fed them soup and hot chocolate, watching color slowly return to their faces. While they ate, I called Marcus repeatedly. Straight to voicemail. Jessica's phone was disconnected. I drove to their house, my key still worked from when I house sat last summer. The front door was unlocked, hanging open. Inside, the heat had been shut off deliberately. The thermostat was set to 45 degrees. In the kitchen, I found empty liquor bottles and drug paraphernalia scattered across the counter. Cocaine residue dusted a mirror next to Jessica's jewelry box. But it was what I found in the master bedroom that made my stomach drop. Financial documents were spread across the bed, loan papers, foreclosure notices, and bank statements showing massive gambling debts. Marcus owed over $200,000 to various creditors, including some very dangerous people based on the threatening letters mixed in with legitimate bank correspondence. The house was 3 months behind on mortgage payments. Then I saw the insurance papers. Life insurance policies on all 3 children, each worth $500,000. Recent policies, taken out just 2 months ago. The beneficiaries were listed as Marcus and Jessica, but there was a handwritten note in Marcus's writing: cabin fire, electrical fault, winter accident, collect and disappear. My hand shook as the pieces clicked together. They weren't planning to come back for the kids. They were planning something infinitely worse. The abandoned children, the shut-off heat, the unlocked door in a dangerous neighborhood. They wanted something to happen. They wanted it to look accidental. I photographed everything with my phone, my fingers trembling as I documented each piece of evidence. In the basement, I found space heaters that had been deliberately disabled, their cords cut. The furnace had been manually shut down and the gas line partially disconnected, not enough to cause an immediate explosion, but enough to create a serious hazard if someone tried to turn it back on. Marcus had planned this. My own brother had orchestrated a scenario where his children would either freeze to death or die in a house fire trying to warm themselves. The insurance money would solve his gambling debts and fund a new life somewhere else. I called the police from the house, but when they arrived, I made a calculated decision. I reported the abandoned children and the unsafe living conditions, but I didn't mention the insurance papers or my theory about Marcus's plan. Not yet. I needed more evidence, and I needed Marcus to think his plan was still viable. The responding officer, Detective Rodriguez, was thorough but focused on immediate child welfare. We'll issue a bolo for the parents and start a neglect investigation. Child Protective Services will be involved, but since your family and the kids are safe with you, we can arrange temporary custody. As we drove home, Emma asked the question that broke my heart. Aunt Sarah, are Mommy and Daddy coming back for us? I looked at her innocent face in the rearview mirror and made a promise that would define everything that came next. Sweetheart, I'm going to make sure you're never abandoned again. Whatever happens, you three are safe now. That night, after the children finally fell asleep in my guest room, I sat at my kitchen table planning my next move. Marcus and Jessica thought they were so clever, disappearing while their children faced death. They probably expected to return in a few days to discover the tragedy, play the grieving parents, and collect their blood money. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd left their children with someone who loved them more than money, someone who would fight to the death to protect them. Someone who understood exactly how dangerous Marcus had become and was willing to play just as dirty to stop him. I opened my laptop and began researching private investigators, criminal lawyers, and forensic accountants. If Marcus wanted to play games with innocent lives, I'd show him what real strategy looked like. He thought abandoning his children was his masterstroke, but it was actually his confession. Every piece of evidence I'd photographed tonight would be preserved, analyzed, and used to destroy him completely. The war for these children's lives had begun, and Marcus had no idea he'd already lost. The next morning brought clarity with the sunrise. While the children ate pancakes at my kitchen table, laughing for the first time in days, I made the calls that would change everything. First, I contacted Rebecca Walsh, the best family lawyer in the city. Her retainer was $15,000, but I'd use my entire savings if necessary. Sarah, what you're describing sounds like premeditated child endangerment with intent to collect insurance money. That's attempted murder, Rebecca said during our emergency consultation. But we need ironclad proof before we make accusations this serious. Right now, all we have is circumstantial evidence and your suspicions. She was right. I needed Marcus to incriminate himself. I hired a private investigator, David Chen, whose specialty was tracking down deadbeat parents and financial crimes. Within 6 hours, he'd located Marcus and Jessica at a casino resort in Atlantic City, charging expensive meals and hotel rooms to credit cards that should have been maxed out. They were living it up while their children had nearly frozen to death. They're using burner phones now, David reported. But I've got photos of them gambling, drinking, partying. They don't look like grieving parents worried about missing children. I can get closer, maybe record some conversations. While David worked his magic, I played mine at home. I called my mother, Patricia, keeping my voice carefully controlled. Mom, Marcus, and Jessica disappeared and left the kids with me. The house was freezing, and the children were in bad shape. Mom's reaction was predictable. Sarah, don't be dramatic. Marcus is going through a rough patch with his business. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Mom, they left 3 children alone for over 24 hours in a house with no heat. In February. Well, maybe they had an emergency. You don't know the whole story. Marcus has always been impulsive, but he loves those children. This was exactly the response I expected. Mom had always enabled Marcus, making excuses for his gambling, his drinking, his countless schemes that left other people holding the bag. When he'd stolen money from our grandmother's estate, Mom called it borrowing. When he'd forged Dad's signature on loans, it was a misunderstanding. But I needed her to be complicit in Marcus's plan for my strategy to work. You're right, Mom. I'm probably overreacting. When Marcus calls you, can you tell him the kids are fine and staying with me until he gets back? I don't want him to worry. Of course, sweetheart. You're such a good sister. Next, I called Marcus's best friend, Tony, who'd been his gambling buddy since college. Tony was weak, easily manipulated, and desperately wanted to be part of Marcus's schemes even though he always got burned. Tony, it's Sarah. Have you heard from Marcus? He left the kids with me, but I'm worried about him and Jessica. Oh, hey Sarah. Yeah, I talked to him yesterday. He said they had to leave town suddenly for Jessica's family emergency. Some kind of crisis with her sick grandmother in Florida. Florida. Interesting lie, since I knew Jessica's grandmother lived in Ohio and had died 3 years ago. Did he say when they'd be back? He was vague about it. Maybe a week or two? He seemed stressed about leaving the kids, but he said you'd take good care of them. Perfect. Now I had witnesses to Marcus's lies and his timeline. If something had happened to the children, he'd planned to be out of town with an alibi. That afternoon, Detective Rodriguez called with an update. We found Marcus and Jessica's car abandoned in a long-term parking garage at the airport. Security footage shows them taking a taxi, but we lost the trail after that. So they definitely planned to disappear, I said. Looks that way. CPS wants to schedule a home visit for tomorrow to assess placement options for the children. Since you're family and they're comfortable with you, temporary custody should be straightforward. After I hung up, Emma appeared in my kitchen doorway. She'd been unusually quiet all day, and I could see she was processing trauma beyond her years. Aunt Sarah, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong? I knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in mine. Emma, you did absolutely nothing wrong. You protected your brother and sister, you were brave and smart, and you saved your family by coming here. None of this is your fault. But why did Mommy and Daddy leave us? Don't they love us anymore? The question hit like a physical blow. How do you explain to a child that their parents are capable of unthinkable evil? How do you preserve their innocence while protecting them from monsters who share their DNA? Sometimes adults make very bad choices when they're scared or desperate, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean you children deserve to suffer for those choices. Right now, my job is to keep you safe while we figure out what happens next. That evening, after the children were asleep, I received a call that changed everything. It was David Chen, and his voice was electric with excitement. Sarah, you're not going to believe what I just recorded. I got into the hotel bar where Marcus and Jessica have been drinking every night. They were drunk, talking loudly, and they had no idea I was recording. Marcus literally said, and I quote, "By now those little bastards are probably dead, and we'll be rich. 3 accidents are better than 1 divorce." My hands went numb. He actually said that? About his own children? It gets worse. Jessica laughed and said something about how you were always too naive to figure out their plan, and how they'd play the devastated parents perfectly when they came back to discover what happened. Marcus said the insurance companies would never suspect anything because you'd be the one who found the bodies. I was their patsy. They'd counted on me being too trusting, too loving to see their real plan. They'd expected me to find 3 small corpses and help them collect blood money by being a credible witness to the tragic accident. I've got it all on digital recording, Sarah. Clear as day. This is criminal conspiracy to commit murder. We've got them. As I hung up the phone, a cold rage settled over me like armor. Marcus had gambled with the wrong stakes this time. He'd bet against a mother's love. Even an aunt who loved like a mother, and he was about to learn that some games you can't win. Tomorrow, I'd start playing my own game. And unlike Marcus, I never bet on anything unless I was guaranteed to win. The next morning, I woke up with the clarity of someone who'd found their purpose. While making breakfast for the children, I called Rebecca Walsh with David's recording. "This changes everything," she said after listening to the audio. "This is direct evidence of conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain. We need to coordinate with law enforcement immediately, but we also need to be strategic about timing." "What do you mean?" "If we move too fast, a defense attorney could argue the recording was taken out of context, or that Marcus was just drunk and talking big. We need them to take concrete steps that prove intent. We need them to actually return and attempt to file insurance claims. It was brilliant and terrifying. We had to let Marcus and Jessica think their plan was working while building an ironclad case against them. I felt like I was defusing a bomb while wearing blindfolds. The CPS visit that afternoon went smoothly. Maria Santos, the caseworker, was impressed with how well the children had adjusted and how thoroughly I'd prepared for their needs. I'd already enrolled them in the local elementary school and arranged for trauma counseling. The children clearly feel safe here, Maria observed, watching Emma help the twins with coloring books. Emma told me you're teaching them to cook and that you've been reading Harry Potter to them every night. They need stability and routine, I said. They've been through enough chaos. I'll recommend extended temporary custody while we search for the parents. Given their abandonment of the children and the unsafe conditions they left them in, termination of parental rights is a real possibility. After Maria left, I sat down with Emma for a conversation I'd been dreading. She was smart, old enough to understand some of what was happening, and I needed her to be prepared for what came next. Emma, there are some grown-up things happening that might be confusing or scary. Some people might ask you questions about your mom and dad, and it's very important that you tell the truth about what happened. She nodded solemnly. About how they left us alone and how cold the house was. Yes. And about anything else you remember. Sometimes adults do bad things, and other adults need to know about it to keep children safe. Are mommy and daddy bad people? The question broke my heart. They made very bad choices that hurt you and Jake and Lucy. That doesn't mean they started out bad, but right now, they're not safe people to be around. That evening, Tony called me, his voice shaky with something that sounded like guilt. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Marcus called me today, and something he said really bothered me. What did he say? He asked if I'd heard anything about the kids. When I said no, he seemed relieved. Like he was hoping I hadn't heard anything. Then he asked if I thought you'd call him if something happened to them. My pulse quickened. What did you tell him? I said of course you would, you'd be devastated and would need family support. But Sarah, why would he ask that? Why wouldn't he just call you himself to check on his own kids? Tony was starting to piece together Marcus's game, and his conscience was finally kicking in. Tony, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Marcus ever talked to you about insurance? About what would happen if something happened to his children? There was a long pause. Jesus, Sarah. About 6 months ago, he mentioned taking out life insurance policies on the kids. He said it was smart financial planning, that all parents should do it. But then he started talking about how much money it would be if something happened to them, and it made me uncomfortable. Did he say anything specific about how something might happen to them? He talked about accidents. House fires, car crashes, things like that. He said insurance companies expect accidents with kids because children don't understand danger. I thought it was just Marcus being morbid, but now. Tony, I need you to think very carefully. Did Marcus ever ask you to do anything specific? Any favors or errands that seemed odd? Another pause, longer this time. He asked me to call his insurance agent last week. Said he was going out of town and wanted to make sure his policies were all up to date. He gave me specific questions to ask about claim procedures and timeline for payouts. My hands were shaking now. Marcus had been preparing Tony to help file the insurance claims after the children died. Tony was supposed to be another witness to Marcus's grief, another person who could testify that Marcus was a loving father who'd taken responsible precautions. Tony, Marcus didn't go out of town for a family emergency. He abandoned his children in a freezing house with no food, no heat, and no supervision. They nearly died. I have proof that he planned it. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Tony finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Oh my God, Sarah. What did I help him do? What was I supposed to help him do? You were supposed to help him collect blood money from his children's deaths. But Tony, you can still do the right thing. You can help me stop him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on the children, watching their peaceful faces in the dim glow of the nightlight. Emma slept in the middle, with Jake curled against her left side and Lucy tucked under her right arm. Even in sleep, she was protecting them. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart stopped when I read it. Hope the little monsters aren't giving you too much trouble. We'll be back soon to pick them up. Tell them Daddy misses them. He was testing me. Seeing if I'd respond, if I'd ask questions, if I'd reveal that I knew what he'd planned. I stared at the message for 20 minutes, crafting and deleting responses. Finally, I typed back. They're fine. Worried about you both. When will you be home? The response came immediately, few more days. Family stuff complicated. Thanks for watching them. You're a lifesaver. A lifesaver. The irony was suffocating. I was saving lives, just not in the way Marcus meant. The next morning, I called Detective Rodriguez and Rebecca Walsh for an emergency conference call. Marcus made contact. He's planning to come back soon, which means he's going to expect to find dead children and file insurance claims. This is perfect, Rebecca said. When he returns and finds the children alive and thriving, his reaction will tell us everything we need to know. We'll have multiple law enforcement officers present to witness his response. Detective Rodriguez agreed. We've been building our case based on your evidence. The abandoned house, the insurance policies, the deliberate sabotage of heating systems, it all supports a pattern of intent. When we add David's recording and now this text message that shows he's not concerned about his missing children, we'll have enough for arrest warrants. But I had one more card to play. I want to record the conversation when he comes back. I want him to think everything went according to plan initially, see how much he'll admit to before he realizes the children are alive. Sarah, that's extremely dangerous, Rodriguez warned. If Marcus realizes you know what he planned, he might become violent. Then make sure you're close enough to intervene quickly. But I need him to confess completely. I need him to admit what he planned to do to these babies, because I want it on record forever. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of monster he really is. As I hung up the phone, Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas. Aunt Sarah? I heard you talking about Daddy. Is he coming back? I knelt down and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. He might be, sweetheart. But if he does, remember what we talked about. Tell the truth about what happened, no matter what anyone says. Can you do that for me? She nodded against my shoulder. I'll protect Jake and Lucy. No, baby. That's my job now. Your only job is to be a kid and let the adults handle the scary stuff. But even as I said it, I knew Emma had already grown up too fast. She'd been forced to be a parent to her siblings when their real parents abandoned them to die. No child should carry that weight. Marcus was about to learn that some sins can never be forgiven, and some games have consequences that last forever. 3 days later, Marcus called. His voice was perfectly casual, almost cheerful. Hey Sarah, we're flying back tonight. Jessica's grandmother is stable now, so we can finally come get the kids. I can't thank you enough for watching them. Of course, Marcus. They've been angels. When should I expect you? Tomorrow morning around 10? We'll pick them up and get out of your hair. After I hung up, I called the team. Detective Rodriguez, Rebecca Walsh, David Chen, and 2 additional officers would be positioned around my house. David had set up recording equipment that would capture everything. I wore a wire under my sweater, and backup recorders were hidden throughout my living room. That morning, I sent the children to my neighbor Mrs. Patterson's house. She was a retired teacher who'd become fond of them over the past week. Just for a few hours, I told Emma. Some grown-ups need to have a serious conversation. At exactly 10 a.m., Marcus's rental car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I watched him and Jessica approach my front door. They looked tanned, relaxed, well-fed. Jessica was wearing new jewelry. They looked like people returning from vacation, not parents frantically searching for missing children. I opened the door with a carefully practiced smile. Marcus. Jessica. Thank God you're okay. Come in, come in. Marcus hugged me, and the normalcy of it made my skin crawl. Sarah, you're a lifesaver. How are the kids? They must have been so worried about us. They're fine now, I said, leading them to the living room. But Marcus, I have to tell you what happened. It was terrifying. His face shifted to concern so quickly it would have been convincing if I hadn't known better. What do you mean? What happened? The house was freezing when I got there. The heat was completely off, and the kids were hypothermic. If they hadn't walked to my house. I let my voice trail off dramatically. Marcus and Jessica exchanged a quick glance. The heat was off? Jessica asked. That's impossible. We left it on. The furnace was shut down completely. Detective Rodriguez said it looked like mechanical failure, possibly dangerous. If the kids had tried to turn it back on. I shuddered theatrically. Detective? Marcus's voice sharpened slightly. Why were police involved? Marcus, your children were abandoned for over 24 hours in a freezing house with no food. I had to report it. CPS was involved. There's an investigation. Now I saw the first crack in his facade. Investigation? Sarah, we didn't abandon them. We had a family emergency. I know that, I said soothingly. I told them it must have been a misunderstanding. But Marcus, where were you really? Jessica's grandmother died 3 years ago. The silence that followed was electric. Marcus's face went through several calculations before settling on indignation. How dare you check up on us? We don't owe you explanations about our private family matters. You're right, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm sure Detective Rodriguez will understand when you explain everything to him. He's very interested in talking to you both. Detective Rodriguez? Jessica's voice cracked slightly. He's investigating child abandonment and endangerment charges. But I'm sure once you explain about the family emergency, everything will be cleared up. Although I'm curious, if you were dealing with a crisis, why didn't you answer your phones? Why didn't you call to check on your children even once? Marcus stood up abruptly. We don't have to justify ourselves to you, Sarah. Where are our kids? We're taking them home right now. Actually, you can't do that. CPS has temporary custody orders in place until the investigation is complete. The children are safe, they're being cared for, and they're staying that way until we know what really happened. The mask finally slipped completely. Marcus's face twisted with rage. This is ridiculous. They're our children. You can't keep them from us. I can and I will, I said, standing to face him. Because unlike you, I actually care whether they live or die. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means I know about the insurance policies, Marcus. $500,000 per child. I know about your gambling debts. I know you deliberately sabotaged the heating system. I know you planned for your children to die so you could collect blood money. Jessica went white as paper. Marcus's face cycled through denial, anger, and finally calculation. You're insane. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. I pulled out my phone and played David's recording. Marcus's drunken voice filled the room, by now those little bastards are probably dead, and we'll be rich." The effect was instantaneous. Jessica started crying. Marcus lunged toward me, but Detective Rodriguez and 2 officers burst through my front door at that exact moment. "Marcus Mitchell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, insurance fraud, and attempted murder of 3 minors." As they cuffed him, Marcus screamed at me. "You vindictive bitch. Those kids were never supposed to survive. You ruined everything." And there it was. His full confession, recorded and witnessed by law enforcement. Jessica collapsed on my couch, sobbing. "I never wanted this. Marcus said we'd just leave for a few days, that someone would find them, that they'd be okay. I never thought. I never believed he'd actually." "You believed it enough to help him plan it," Detective Rodriguez said grimly, producing handcuffs for her as well. "Jessica Mitchell, you're under arrest as an accessory to conspiracy to commit murder." As they dragged both of them away, Marcus turned back to me with pure hatred in his eyes. "You think you've won? Those kids will end up in foster care anyway. You can't adopt them, you're single, you work full-time. The system will destroy them just like we would have." "Actually, Marcus," I said with a smile that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds, "I've already started the adoption process. Rebecca Walsh is the best family lawyer in the state, and she's confident we'll have everything finalized within 6 months. Your children will have a real home with someone who loves them more than money." The look of absolute defeat on his face was the sweetest revenge I'd ever tasted. The media explosion was immediate and devastating for Marcus and Jessica. By evening, their mug shots were on every local news station. "Parents plan children's deaths for insurance money" dominated headlines. The story went viral within hours, 3 innocent children nearly murdered by their own parents for $500,000 each. My phone rang constantly. Reporters, distant relatives, people I hadn't heard from in years all wanted statements, interviews, inside information. I ignored them all except for one call from my mother. "Sarah, this is all a terrible misunderstanding," Mom said, her voice shaking. "Marcus would never hurt those children. The police have it wrong. Mom, I have recordings of Marcus saying he hoped his children were dead so he could collect insurance money. That's not what he meant. Marcus has a dark sense of humor when he's drinking. You're taking it out of context." Even faced with undeniable evidence, she was still making excuses for him. "Mom, he sabotaged the heating system in their house. He deliberately created conditions that would kill 3 children. Maybe the heating system just broke. Maybe it was an accident." I realized then that some people will never accept truth that threatens their worldview. Mom had spent 30 years enabling Marcus, covering for him, pretending his increasingly dangerous behavior was just misunderstood. She'd rather live in denial than admit she'd raised a monster. "I won't be speaking to you again until you acknowledge what Marcus did to those children," I said quietly. "When you're ready to choose your grandchildren's safety over your son's reputation, call me back." I hung up and blocked her number. The children's reactions varied dramatically. Jake and Lucy, being only 6, didn't fully understand what had happened. They knew Mommy and Daddy had made very bad choices and wouldn't be coming back, but the complexities of murder plots were beyond their comprehension. They missed their parents but seemed to be adjusting well to stability and consistent care. Emma was different. She understood everything. "They wanted us to die, didn't they?" she asked me 3 days after the arrest, her voice unnaturally calm for a 10-year-old. I'd been dreading this conversation. "Yes, sweetheart. They did." "Because of money?" "Because they made terrible choices and cared more about money than about you." She was quiet for a long time, staring out my kitchen window. "I'm glad they're gone," she finally said. "Is that bad? Should I be sad?" "Emma, there's no right or wrong way to feel about this. They were your parents, but they hurt you. It's okay to feel angry, or sad, or relieved, or confused. All of those feelings are normal. I just want Jake and Lucy to be safe. I don't want them to remember being cold and scared. The maturity in her voice broke my heart. That's my job now, baby. You don't have to take care of anyone but yourself. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Marcus and Jessica both faced multiple felony charges that could result in life sentences without parole. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the insurance documents, the deliberately sabotaged heating system, witness testimony from Tony about Marcus's suspicious questions about claim procedures. Their court-appointed attorneys tried to negotiate plea bargains, but the district attorney was unwavering. This was premeditated attempted murder of 3 children for financial gain. We're seeking maximum penalties. Rebecca Walsh kept me updated on the custody proceedings. CPS is recommending permanent termination of parental rights based on the criminal charges and the clear evidence of endangerment. Your adoption petition is being fast-tracked given the circumstances. How fast? Normally it would take 18 months. In this case, probably 6 months total. The court recognizes that these children need stability and that you've already proven you can provide it. Tony visited me 2 weeks after the arrests, bringing toys for the children and carrying a burden of guilt that was written all over his face. Sarah, I keep thinking about all the signs I ignored. All the times Marcus said things that should have worried me. I could have stopped this. Tony, Marcus is a master manipulator. He's been practicing on our family for 30 years. You couldn't have known how far he'd go. But the insurance questions, the way he talked about accidents. I should have said something. You did say something. When it mattered, when I asked you directly, you told me the truth. That's part of what's going to convict him. The children were in therapy twice a week with Dr. Sarah Kim, a specialist in childhood trauma. She assured me they were resilient and responding well to treatment. The fact that Emma protected her siblings and got them to safety shows remarkable strength. All 3 children have good emotional foundations despite what they've been through. But it was the financial investigation that revealed just how deep Marcus's betrayal ran. David Chin discovered that Marcus had been stealing from the children's college funds for over 2 years, emptying accounts their grandparents had set up. He'd forged Jessica's signature to take out loans against the house without her knowledge initially. The gambling debts were even worse than I'd thought. Over $300,000 to various creditors, including loan sharks who'd begun making threats. He was desperate, David explained. The insurance money wasn't just about greed, he genuinely believed he was going to be killed if he didn't pay up soon. In his mind, sacrificing his children was the only way to save his own life. The revelation made Marcus's actions even more despicable. He wasn't just greedy. He was a coward who'd chosen to murder innocent children rather than face the consequences of his own bad decisions. 3 weeks after the arrests, I received a letter forwarded from the jail. Marcus had written to me, probably hoping to manipulate me into helping with his defense or providing character testimony. Sarah, the letter began, I know you think I'm a monster, but you don't understand the pressure I was under. I never actually intended for anything to happen to the kids. I just needed to buy time to figure out another solution. If you testify about my character, about how I've always been a good brother, it might help with sentencing. I read the letter twice, then fed it through my paper shredder. Marcus still didn't understand that actions have consequences. He still thought this was a game he could win with the right strategy. That evening, I tucked all 3 children into their beds. They'd started sleeping in separate rooms now that they felt secure. And realized something profound. For the first time in weeks, none of them had nightmares. They weren't waking up in the middle of the night checking to make sure I was still there. They were beginning to trust that tomorrow would be safe. Marcus had gambled everything on a plan that required his children to die. Instead, he'd given them something better than they'd ever had, a mother who would die before letting anyone hurt them. 6 months later, I stood in Judge Patricia Williams's courtroom holding 3 adoption certificates. Emma, Jake, and Lucy were officially my children. The biological parents who'd tried to murder them for insurance money were serving consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The trial had been a media sensation. Marcus's defense team tried everything, claiming temporary insanity due to gambling addiction, arguing that he never actually intended harm, even suggesting that I'd manipulated the evidence to frame him. None of it worked. The recordings were too clear, the physical evidence too overwhelming, the witness testimony too consistent. Jessica had eventually flipped on Marcus, testifying that he'd planned everything and convinced her it was their only option to avoid being killed by loan sharks. Her cooperation earned her a plea deal. 25 years instead of life, but she'd still die in prison. The children would be adults with children of their own before she was eligible for parole. Tony had become an unexpected ally throughout the process. Guilt over his unwitting participation in Marcus's plan motivated him to be completely honest in his testimony, providing details that helped convict both defendants. He'd also started attending Gamblers Anonymous and regularly sent the children birthday and Christmas gifts. "I can't undo what I helped make possible," he told me after the sentencing. "But I can make sure I never ignore warning signs again." Even my mother eventually came around, though it took the children's psychological evaluations being read aloud in court for her to accept reality. Hearing a professional explain how Emma had PTSD from trying to keep her siblings alive while their parents planned their deaths finally broke through her denial. "I failed you," she admitted during a tearful phone call 3 months after the trial. "I failed those babies by protecting Marcus instead of protecting them. I don't know how to live with that." "You live with it by doing better going forward," I told her. "The children need their grandmother, but only if you can accept that their father is a monster who tried to kill them." She visited every Sunday now, bringing homemade cookies and reading stories to Jake and Lucy while helping Emma with her homework. She'd never mentioned Marcus's name in front of the children, and she never would. The insurance companies had cooperated fully with the investigation and used the case as an example in training sessions about recognizing fraud. They'd also established college funds for all 3 children as a gesture of goodwill, ensuring they'd have financial security despite their parents' attempts to steal their futures. Dr. Kim continued working with the children, and her progress reports were encouraging. Emma is learning to be a child again instead of a caretaker. Jake and Lucy barely remember the trauma now, they've adapted beautifully to stability and affection. All 3 children show remarkable resilience. Emma had become the leader she was born to be, but in healthy ways now. She helped Jake and Lucy with their homework, taught them to ride bikes, and protected them from playground bullies. But she also played with dolls, had sleepovers with friends, and sometimes needed comfort when thunderstorms scared her. She was learning to be both strong and vulnerable. Jake had discovered a talent for art and spent hours drawing elaborate fantasy worlds filled with dragons and princesses. Lucy was obsessed with horses and insisted on wearing cowboy boots everywhere. They were becoming individuals instead of just survivors. The house was constantly filled with noise now, laughter, music, friends coming over, the controlled chaos of childhood. I'd never realized how quiet my life had been until it was full of soccer practices and parent-teacher conferences and bedtime stories that stretched much longer than they were supposed to. 6 months after the adoption was finalized, Emma asked me the question I'd been expecting. "Mom, Sarah, do you ever wish we hadn't knocked on your door that night?" I was braiding her hair for school, and I met her eyes in the bathroom mirror. "Emma, that night was the best thing that ever happened to me. I'd been living a half-life, going through the motions, not really understanding what I was missing. You 3 gave me purpose, you gave me love, you gave me a family. I should be thanking you for choosing my door. Even though it was scary and hard and we brought so much trouble. Especially because of that. You know what I learned from all this? Blood doesn't make you family, love does. Care does. Showing up when someone needs you does. Your biological parents shared your DNA, but they weren't your family when it mattered most. Family is the people who fight for you, who protect you, who choose you every single day." That afternoon, I got an unexpected call from Detective Rodriguez. Sarah, I wanted you to know Marcus tried to appeal his conviction. The appellate court not only denied it, they used his case as an example of why attempted murder of children should carry the same sentence as successful murder. His case is now precedent that will help protect other kids in similar situations. Even from prison, Marcus was still helping children, just not in the way he'd ever intended. That evening, I tucked 3 sleepy children into their beds and realized something that made me smile. We'd been a family for over a year now, and not one of them had ever asked when their real parents were coming back. I was their real parent now, the one who showed up, who stayed, who put their needs above my own comfort. Jake fell asleep clutching a stuffed dragon. Lucy curled up with her favorite book about horses. Emma kissed my cheek and whispered, "Love you, Mom Sarah." As I turned off the lights and headed downstairs, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. Marcus had tried to teach me that blood loyalty trumped everything else, that family meant protecting each other regardless of the cost. He'd been wrong about the loyalty part, but right about family being everything. The family I'd built wasn't bound by genetics or obligation. It was built by choice, sustained by love, and strengthened by the knowledge that we'd all choose each other again, every single day. Looking back, I think Marcus's greatest miscalculation wasn't underestimating law enforcement or overestimating his own cleverness. His biggest mistake was assuming that love could be measured in dollars, that children were assets to be liquidated when convenient, that family was just a word instead of a commitment. He'd tried to cash in on innocent lives and instead handed me the greatest gift imaginable, 3 children who taught me what unconditional love actually means. Sometimes karma doesn't just come back around. Sometimes it comes back with interest, and sometimes the person who tries to destroy everything ends up creating something more beautiful than they could ever have imagined. Now I'm curious about your own experiences with family dynamics and justice. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed unforgivable lines? How do you define real family versus biological connections? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your stories and perspectives. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama with the endings these situations deserve. Share this with someone who understands that protecting children always comes first, no matter who the threat is. Thank you for following our journey from that terrifying night to this beautiful life we've built together. Remember, family isn't about the DNA you're born with, it's about the people who choose to love you when it matters most.